The empty seat. The Galactic Assembly Hall was the most magnificent structure in known space. Suspended in orbit around the neutral world of Centauri Prime, it housed representatives from over 10,000 civilizations, spanning 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Its vast central chamber featured a circular arrangement of seats, each one meticulously designed to accommodate the unique physiologies of its occupants. Ambassador Unveils of the Lyran Confederation stood at the entrance, momentarily frozen in awe despite having prepared for this moment her entire career. The walls shimmered with dynamic displays, showing stellar cartography in real time. The transparent ceiling revealed the spectacular vista of stars and nearby planets. A low hum of translator devices filled the air as diplomats from across the galaxy conducted their business. First time. A voice to her right broke her trance. A tall, thin Vorgan diplomat had paused beside her, mandibles clicking in what she recognized as amusement. Is it that obvious? Nira straightened her formal attire, the deep blue signifying her homeworld's oceanic heritage. Everyone remembers their first day at the assembly. The Vorgan said, "I'm Representative Torque. Let me show you to your seat." As they navigated the crowded chamber, Nira noticed the intricate dance of politics already in motion. Species that were historical enemies maintained careful distances, while allies clustered in animated discussions. Torque provided running commentary on various factions and key players, information Nira had studied but now saw in living color. They reached the Lyran section, where Nira would represent her people's interests for the next 5 cycles. As she settled into her seat, she surveyed the vast chamber, mentally mapping the power dynamics at play. That's when she noticed it, an anomaly in the perfect symmetry of the hall. On the far side, positioned prominently yet isolated from neighboring delegations, sat an empty seat. Unlike temporary vacancies scattered throughout the chamber, this one seemed different. It wasn't just unoccupied. It appeared untouched, as though deliberately preserved in its emptiness. "Representative Torque," Nira asked, keeping her voice casual, "whose seat is that?" "The one at position Gamma 17. The Vorgan's casual demeanor vanished. His upper appendages stiffened, and he glanced around before replying in a markedly lower tone. "You have good eyes, Ambassador. Most newcomers don't notice it until much later, if at all." "Notice what?" Nira pressed, her curiosity piqued by his reaction. "That seat belongs to no one. Or rather, it belongs to those who choose not to sit in it." Torque's translator device seemed to struggle with his suddenly formal language. "The Earth seat remains empty by mutual agreement." "Earth?" Nira frowned. The name sounded vaguely familiar from her historical studies, but details eluded her. "I don't recall Earth among the Assembly's membership records. Because it isn't in them. Not the public ones, at least." Torque's voice had fallen to barely above a whisper. "If you value your position here, Ambassador Vos, you won't pursue this particular curiosity. Some questions in the Assembly are tolerated. Others." He made a gesture suggesting disappearance. "The session begins shortly. I should return to my delegation." Nira watched him hurry away, her mind racing. In her extensive preparation for this posting, she had memorized every major and minor power in the Assembly. Earth was not among them, yet it apparently warranted a permanent, prominently positioned seat. The opening ceremonies began, filled with the usual diplomatic pageantry. Representatives were acknowledged, treaties formalized, and disputes scheduled for mediation. Throughout it all, Nira found her attention repeatedly drawn to the empty seat. No one approached it. In fact, she noticed with growing interest, most delegates seemed to avoid even looking in its direction. After the session concluded, Nira made her way to the archives wing. As a new ambassador, she had legitimate reasons to request historical records. The archivist, a member of the ancient Tellarite species, regarded her with compound eyes that betrayed no emotion. "I need information on Earth," Nira stated plainly. "Historical context for its position in the Assembly." The archivist's movements slowed perceptibly. "Earth records are restricted, Ambassador. Level 7 clearance required." "On whose authority?" the High Council itself. Standing directive, established 247 cycles ago. Nira frowned. I'm conducting legitimate research as Lyran ambassador. Surely basic historical context falls within my purview. I can provide you with the official summary, the archivist replied, tapping a sequence into the terminal. Nothing more without proper clearance. The display illuminated with text so sparse it bordered on insulting. Earth, Sol system, non-participatory member status, diplomatic relations, limited, trade status, restricted, contact protocols, see Security Directive 1173B. This tells me nothing, Nira said, unable to hide her frustration. Those seeking further information may submit formal requests through proper channels. The archivist's tone made clear the conversation was over. Back in her quarters, Nira found herself unable to let the matter rest. Something about that empty seat, so deliberately maintained yet so conspicuously avoided, nagged at her diplomatic instincts. Her people hadn't sent her to the assembly to merely occupy space. She was there to understand the true power dynamics of the galaxy. 3 days later, an unexpected invitation arrived. Ambassador Seleth of the Arcturus Confederation, one of the oldest living diplomats in the assembly, requested her presence for the traditional welcoming of new representatives. Seleth was a legend, having served for nearly a century, his tentacled form now supported by a hovering mobility mechanism. Nira arrived at his chambers to find herself the only guest. The ancient diplomat gestured toward a chair fashioned to accommodate her physiology. "You've been asking questions, young ambassador," Seleth began without preamble. "Questions about Earth." Nira stiffened. "I've been researching relevant historical contexts, as is my right." "Indeed. And normally I would encourage such thoroughness." Seleth moved toward a secured cabinet, his tentacles manipulating a complex lock sequence. "But in this case, your inquiries have attracted attention." "From whom?" "From those who prefer certain histories remain obscured." He extracted a small data crystal that glowed with a faint blue light. "I am very old, Ambassador Voss. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have witnessed the assembly transform from a genuine forum of cooperation into—" He gestured vaguely at the walls. "This elaborate performance. You disapprove of the assembly?" Nira asked, surprised by his candor. "I believe in truth, even uncomfortable truth, especially when its absence threatens the very stability it supposedly protects." He extended the crystal toward her. "This contains information about Earth that isn't in the official records, information I have personally compiled over decades." Nira hesitated. "Why show this to me? We've only just met." "Because you asked the question others avoid. Because your people are relatively new to the assembly and haven't yet learned to fear the wrong questions. And because I am too old to care about consequences anymore." His voice carried a weight of centuries. "Take it or leave it, Ambassador. But if you take it, view it privately and securely." That night, behind locked doors with communications disabled, Nira inserted the crystal into her private terminal. The data was fragmentary: personal accounts, unofficial records, redacted reports pieced together over decades. The story that emerged left her stunned. Earth, a planet on the galactic periphery, had developed faster than typical evolutionary patterns predicted. Humans had progressed from primitive technology to space exploration in mere centuries, rather than the millennia most species required. When the assembly first detected their radio transmissions, they followed standard protocol for pre-contact observation. But what they observed disturbed them. Humans were fractious, tribal, and alarmingly adaptive. They thrived in environments that would kill most species. Their history was punctuated by violent conflicts, yet marked by astonishing technological leaps during those very periods of strife. Most concerning to the assembly observers was humanity's unpredictability. Unlike other species whose actions could be modeled with relative accuracy, humans routinely defied probabilistic forecasts. They formed alliances that made no evolutionary sense. They sacrificed individual advantage for abstract principles. They demonstrated both terrible cruelty and profound compassion, often simultaneously. The Assembly's first official contact with Earth had been calculated to occur during a period of relative stability. The diplomatic delegation arrived with practiced messages of galactic brotherhood and offers of technological exchange. What happened next was classified at the highest levels, but Seleth had pieced together the truth through decades of careful investigation. The humans had seen through the Assembly's offers immediately. They recognized the subtle technologies embedded in the gifted devices, monitoring systems, influence mechanisms, behavioral modifiers that had worked flawlessly on countless other emerging species. Instead of the grateful acceptance the Assembly expected, the humans responded with something no other species had ever shown: righteous anger. They not only rejected the Assembly's overtures, but did something unprecedented. They reversed engineered the monitoring technology and used it to track the observers who had been studying them. They located hidden monitoring stations throughout their solar system and systematically disabled them. They'd broadcast messages on Assembly frequencies, making clear they understood exactly what had been attempted. The Assembly, faced with this unprecedented response, made a critical mistake. Rather than acknowledging their methods and attempting honest diplomacy, they activated contingency protocols designed for hostile species. A small but advanced fleet was dispatched to contain the human threat through a show of overwhelming force. The records of what happened next were heavily redacted, but the outcome was clear enough. The containment fleet never returned. In its place came a single human vessel, which appeared without warning in the heart of Assembly space, bypassing every defense system, as if they didn't exist. The vessel delivered a single message before disappearing again: a formal request for membership in the Assembly, alongside terms that amounted to a demand for absolute non-interference in human affairs. The Assembly, shaken by this demonstration of technological prowess they couldn't explain, granted the request. The empty seat was established, but humans never sent a permanent representative. They occasionally sent observers who sat silently, watching the proceedings before departing without explanation. Over time, direct contact with humans became increasingly rare. The Assembly established a strict quarantine zone around Sol system. Official records were altered to minimize humanity's significance. The empty seat remained as both acknowledgement and warning. The final entry in Seleth's compilation was the most disturbing. Through painstaking analysis of ship movements, diplomatic communications, and resource allocations, he had determined that the Assembly's leadership had been systematically diverting massive resources toward the development of technologies that might counter humanity's apparent advantages. For over 2 centuries, while presenting an image of benevolent governance, the Assembly had been preparing for war against a species that had never actually threatened them. Driven by fear of the unpredictable, the uncontrollable. As the data stream ended, Nera sat in stunned silence. The implications were staggering. The entire galactic political structure she had dedicated her life to understanding was founded on a lie perpetuated out of fear of a species that had asked for nothing more than to be left alone. She made her decision before dawn. She would see Earth for herself, no matter the risk. Part 2. The Silent Watchers. Securing transport to a quarantine system required creativity, connections, and an alarming amount of credits. Nera had liquidated personal assets and called in favors from contacts who operated in the gray areas of interstellar commerce. The vessel she chartered was small, nondescript, and operated by a Rigelian captain who asked no questions beyond the coordinates and payment terms. "You understand," Captain Morai said as they prepared to depart from a minor trading outpost 3 systems removed from Centauri Prime. "Once we cross the quarantine boundary, we'll be in violation of at least 17 Assembly statutes." "I understand." Nera checked the secure compartment where she'd hidden Seleth's data crystal. "And you understand that your compensation reflects those risks." Indeed, the Rigelian's facial slits narrowed in what might have been amusement. Though I wonder what compels an assembly ambassador to risk her career and possibly her life on such a journey. Truth, Nera replied simply. Something in increasingly short supply. The journey to the edge of Sol system took 11 days, during which Nera reviewed everything Seleth had compiled about Earth and its people. The more she studied, the more questions arose. If humans possessed technology advanced enough to bypass assembly defenses centuries ago, how far had they progressed since? If they could have destroyed the assembly but chose not to, what were their true intentions? On the 12th day, Captain Morai called her to the bridge. We're approaching the quarantine boundary. Final chance to reconsider, Ambassador. Proceed as planned. The ship slipped across the invisible line marked only by coordinates on their navigation system. For several hours, nothing happened. The silence was almost disappointing after so much buildup. Perhaps the quarantine is merely symbolic, Nera suggested, watching the empty scanner displays. Perhaps, Morai replied, though his tone suggested skepticism. They were halfway to Pluto's orbit when the first anomaly appeared. The ship's sensors detected a fluctuation in surrounding space. Not a vessel or station, but a distortion in the fabric of reality itself. Some kind of cloaking technology? Nera asked. Nothing I've ever encountered. Moray's fingers moved rapidly across the controls. It's as if space itself is folded somehow. Before they could investigate further, a second anomaly appeared. Then a third, until they were surrounded by invisible presences detectable only by their effect on sensor readings. We're being scanned, Morai reported, an edge of tension in his voice. Multiple frequencies, including several I've never seen before. Can you hail them? Nera moved to the communication station. I'm not detecting any conventional receivers, but... He was interrupted by the ship's systems suddenly activating on their own. Displays flickered, changed configuration, then stabilized, showing an unfamiliar interface. Words appeared in the assembly's standard diplomatic language. State your identity and purpose. Nera stepped forward. I am Ambassador Nera Voles of the Lyran Confederation. I seek peaceful contact with representatives of Earth. There was a pause, then. Unauthorized approach. The Sol system is restricted under Covenant Article 7. Reverse course immediately. I understand the restrictions, Nera replied, choosing her words carefully. I come seeking truth about the relationship between Earth and the Assembly. I believe deception has harmed both our peoples. Another pause, longer this time. Maintain position. Do not attempt to advance further into the system. The displays returned to normal, though the anomalies surrounding them remained. What now? Morai asked, his characteristic composure visibly strained. We wait, Nera said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. They didn't wait long. Less than an hour later, a vessel appeared where nothing had been moments before. It was smaller than Nera had expected, sleek and silver, with no visible external propulsion system. It matched their position with impossible precision. Their communication system activated again, but this time with audio and visual. The being on screen was unmistakably human. Bipedal, with exposed facial features lacking the protective coverings most species evolved. This particular specimen had darker skin, close-cropped hair, and eyes that seemed to evaluate Nera with unsettling directness. Ambassador Vos, the human said, I am Commander Elena Rise of Earth Diplomatic Security. Your presence here violates multiple agreements between Earth and the Assembly. I come as an individual seeking truth, not as an Assembly representative. Nera replied, I've discovered disturbing inconsistencies in the official record regarding Earth's relationship with the galactic community, and you decided the appropriate response was to violate a restricted zone. There was something in the human's tone. Not anger exactly, but a dry skepticism. After learning that the Assembly has been systematically lying to its members while preparing for possible conflict with your species, yes, I considered direct contact necessary. The human's expression changed subtly. You have evidence of these preparations. I do. Nera held up the data crystal. compiled over decades by Ambassador Seleth of the Arcturus Confederation. Seleth, Commander Rice said, recognition evident in her voice. He's still alive. You know him. He was one of the few who objected to the containment strategies proposed after our first contact. For the first time, she smiled slightly. We've maintained unofficial channels of communication with certain assembly members who demonstrated integrity. After a brief consultation with unseen others, Commander Reyes made a decision. You and your captain will be escorted to Ganymede Station. Your vessel will remain under observation. If your intentions are as stated, you have nothing to fear. The journey deeper into the system revealed none of the primitive conditions Nira had half expected based on assembly records. Instead, she witnessed a civilization clearly more advanced than officially acknowledged. Massive structures orbited Jupiter and Saturn. The asteroid belt showed evidence of extensive mining operations, and as they approached the station orbiting Jupiter's largest moon, Nira saw vessels of designs unlike anything in assembly space, some so strange she couldn't discern how they functioned. Ganymede Station itself defied expectations. Rather than the utilitarian military installation she anticipated, it was a vast, elegant structure with transparent sections revealing internal gardens, water features, and spaces clearly designed for aesthetics as much as function. After docking, Nira and Captain Morai were escorted through security protocols that were thorough but not invasive. Their quarters were comfortable, with accommodations thoughtfully adapted to their physiologies. They studied us well, Morai noted, examining a sleeping platform perfectly suited for Rigelian anatomy. Of course we have, said a new voice. A human female entered, older than Commander Reyes, with silver-streaked hair and an air of quiet authority. I'm Director Sophia Chen, Diplomatic Intelligence Division. Welcome to Ganymede. The next 12 hours were among the most enlightening of Nira's life. Director Chen confirmed much of what Seleth had pieced together, but filled crucial gaps and corrected misinterpretations. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the assembled narrative. Humans had indeed recognized the Assembly's attempts at subtle manipulation during first contact, but their response hadn't been motivated primarily by anger, rather by a fundamental need for autonomy that seemed hardwired into their psychology. We asked for one thing, Director Chen explained as they walked through a massive arboretum filled with Earth species, to be treated as equals, not as experimental subjects or strategic assets. When the Assembly responded with force, we demonstrated that we could defend ourselves, then extended a hand in peace anyway. But you never fully engaged with the Assembly, Nira pointed out. The empty seat is a choice, not a rejection, Chen replied. We maintain observation posts throughout Assembly space. We monitor communications, trade, diplomatic exchanges. We've intervened discreetly when necessary to prevent certain catastrophes. But we recognized early that full integration into the Assembly would require compromising core aspects of human independence and the Assembly's preparations for conflict. Chen's expression darkened. A tragic misunderstanding that became self-reinforcing. The Assembly feared what they couldn't predict or control. We detected their military buildups, their attempts to develop countermeasures against technologies they barely understood. From their perspective, our advancement and our refusal to fully disclose our capabilities looked like aggression. From my perspective as well, Nira admitted. The crystal Seleth gave me. The evidence suggests your species possesses technology centuries beyond assembly levels. The ability to appear undetected in assembly space, to bypass our strongest defenses. Some of what you're attributing to advanced technology is simply different thinking, Chen said. Humans evolved as adaptable problem solvers with highly divergent thought patterns. We see possibilities where others see impossibilities. We question assumptions others take for granted. She guided Nira to a viewing platform overlooking a vast chamber where humans and various non-human species worked side by side on projects Nira couldn't begin to comprehend. What you're seeing isn't just Earth, Chen continued. Over the centuries, We've welcomed refugees, dissidents, and free thinkers from across the galaxy. Species the Assembly considered problematic often found homes here, contributing their unique perspectives to our civilization. The Assembly doesn't know this, Nira said, realization dawning. They think they're preparing for conflict with just humans, not an alliance of multiple species. Which is why your presence here is so significant, Ambassador. Chen turned to face her directly. The situation has reached a critical point. Our intelligence suggests the Assembly's Security Council is closer than ever to authorizing direct action against Earth based on fundamentally flawed intelligence and centuries of fear. What do you want from me? Nira asked, understanding now why she'd been allowed to proceed so far into the system. We want you to carry a message back, not to the Assembly as a whole, but to those within it who, like Seleth, value truth over comfortable lies. Show them what you've seen here. Tell them that Earth has never sought conflict, but we will not surrender our independence or our principles. And if the Assembly forces a confrontation, they will discover that their worst fears about us were deeply underestimated. The words hung in the air between them, neither threat nor boast but simple fact. There's one more thing you should see, Chen said after a moment, leading Nira to a secure transport. They journeyed to a facility deeper within Ganymede, where security was noticeably tighter. Inside a vast chamber, Nira saw what at first appeared to be a small sun suspended in a containment field, a swirling mass of energy that pulsed with impossible colors. What is it? She whispered. We call it the Gateway, Chen replied. It's how we travel instantaneously across the galaxy, how we appeared in Assembly space centuries ago. It's not technology in the conventional sense. It's a manipulation of reality itself, opening pathways through dimensions you don't have words for. This is beyond anything the Assembly has even theorized, Nira said, awestruck, because the Assembly builds on known principles, refining and improving incrementally. Humans, Chen smiled slightly. We leap. We imagine what should be impossible, then find ways to make it possible. It's our greatest strength and what makes us most dangerous. Not our weapons, but our ideas. As Nira prepared to depart 3 days later, she carried with her not just a message, but a profound shift in understanding. The crystal Seleth had given her had been replaced with a new one, containing unaltered records of humanity's true history, their actual capabilities, and most importantly, their open invitation for a new beginning. A relationship based on mutual respect rather than fear and control. Captain Morai, unusually subdued since witnessing the same revelations, set course back toward Assembly space. Do you think they'll listen? He asked as the anomalies that marked Saul's boundary vanished behind them. Some will, Nira replied, thinking of Seleth and others like him. Others won't be able to hear anything past their own fear. And if they choose conflict? Nira recalled the Gateway, the impossible technology she'd glimpsed, and most of all, the resolute clarity in Director Chen's eyes. Then the empty seat will remain empty forever, she said quietly, and the Assembly will learn why humans, for all their willingness to extend peace, were never truly conquered.